All right, now that Ryan McLeod is a Buffalo Sabre, some big impacts on what the Sabres lineup will look like, especially for Peyton Krebs. We'll dive in to the center position and what that trade means for Krebs in particular coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One of those places is on YouTube, where you can watch our show. Easiest way to do that, if you haven't watched us before, just go to YouTube, search Locked On Sabres, hit the subscribe button, and you can catch us there as well. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Playoffs have wound down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. It's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list. So we'll get to the impact of the Ryan McLeod trade today on the rest of the Sabres lineup and a couple of trade ideas that I actually think branch off of McLeod now being on the Sabres. A deal that, if you missed our last episode, we went really in deep on. A deal that every day that passes, I'm more and more in on, and also a little more and more scared of, because I keep thinking about what Matthew Savoy is going to look like and is what he is going to be in Edmonton once he eventually plays with McDavid or Draisaitl, which I think is a very strong possibility in his NHL career. But we'll see where that goes. You can't be scared of what the guy's going to do on the other team, especially when he goes to a team like that, because oftentimes it's going to work. But we'll get to some of the results of our Twitter poll and our text line as well on looking at where we're at now. Is this enough? Is there something else coming? And kind of, again, as I mentioned, Peyton Krebs' role now with this team, should he remain, given that they just traded for Ryan McLeod. Our text line, by the way, if you are not already a texter and you want to become a subscriber, be sure to go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. I was diving through the text group today. One listener's text was, I want to hear an episode on the state of the defense. Maybe we'll do that a little bit later in the week. Projected 6 pairings. Who's the 7th defenseman? What do you do with Yoki Haru? I have a little bit on Yoki Haru, actually, a little bit later on in today's show. What about Bo Byram? Like, who does he play with? So we'll definitely get to that a little bit later in the week, because I think the blue line is a little curious right now. There are probably, I want to say, 9 defensemen that have at least some shot to play on opening night. 9 defensemen total. That's something we'll dive more into. I think I could go all the way down to Ryan Johnson as a guy that could do it, even if you bet against him. So the blue line is interesting, even though they haven't made a lot of big changes on that front this offseason. Kind of the fact they haven't made changes maybe is the reason why that's a little bit interesting. So good question. We'll get to that a little bit later in the week. We'll probably spend a whole show on the blue line itself. One other texter sent in today, legit question, and this kind of will lead us to the lineup a little bit here in today's show. We all talk about needing to trade for a top 6 winger. However, where will he fit? Someone will probably have to be traded out. You're not moving anyone you signed recently, so whose spot will he take? Here are the lines, and this is what the listener put together. Thompson centering Tuch and Peterka, fine. Cousins centering Quinn and Benson, fine. McLeod centering Zucker and Greenway, okay? And then Lafferty centering Aube-Kubel and Malenstein. Krebs isn't even in those top 4 lines. Imagine now I input a Nikolai Ehlers, for instance, into the top 6. That bumps what? Benson down to the 3rd line, and Zucker stays on the 3rd line. Now Greenway gets bumped down to the 4th line, and now someone I just signed, Lafferty, Aube-Kubel, and Malenstein, are out of the lineup, in addition to Krebs already being out of the lineup. I do think the obvious answer here, though, is someone on the current lineup would get moved out in a deal where you're bringing in a top 6 forward. Even if it's not someone who is the main piece of a trade, someone that is a part of the trade, though, going back. Me and this listener actually went back and forth maybe about Greenway being someone that they could, throw back in a trade in a top 6 deal, because Greenway, I mean, can we say he was a Granato guy? They brought him in at a deadline for a second-round pick, and what we immediately saw about his background was, Granato guy, coached by Granato at the United States National Development Program. And Granato spoke about wanting to get more out of him offensively and, working with him like he had as a teenager. So and Greenway's got 1 year left on his contract. They kind of have added top 6 forwards that are unlike him this offseason in one aspect. Greenway is physical, but Malenstein, Obe-Kubel, Lafferty, and McLeod all have lightning fast speed. And Greenway is the opposite of that. Greenway is someone that I can't even tell you how slow he is by NHL standards, because NHL Edge has this very cowardly way of putting up all their skating metrics by percentile. Like I told you last week, that Obe-Kubel is like 97th percentile for average skating speed, and McLeod is 100th percentile. If anyone's below the 50th percentile, we can't hurt anybody's feelings, so we just have to put below 50th percentile. So I don't know if Greenway is the 3rd percentile or if he's the 47th percentile. The NHL, too cowardly to tell you who's bad at skating. I mean, what a league. What a league, man. Just so afraid for how tough, they think their players are, which they are. What, you're going to hurt their feelings because you're pointing out that they're not maybe the fastest guy in the world? I hate that with the NHL. So anyways, I watch Greenway, though, enough to know that he's not fleet of foot. He's not quick whatsoever. 1 year left in his contract. Renato guy, yeah, he could be a part of a deal that would get sent back and would open up a spot in the lineup. In your third line, that could be McLeod, Zucker, and Benson. And you still got your physical fast guys in your fourth line. Although, Greenway is not, to me, the clearest example of a type of trade. I think that right now, the most expendable forward on the Buffalo Sabres roster, because of the Ryan McLeod trade on Friday, which immediately fills in third line center, is Peyton Krebs, who before Friday afternoon was everyone's penciled in name to be the third line center. Now, with McLeod in the picture, Krebs is often, I think, bumped from third line center to healthy scratch, because Sam Lafferty, I think by most people's accounting, they're going to be their fourth line center. But maybe it's a competition between him and Krebs. Before we get to what a Krebs trade could look like and what his value should be right now, let's say he is on the team. What's his role? And what's his opportunity to grow? I said last week on this show, look at me, how sad. I just went to Google Peyton Krebs cap friendly, and cap friendly is shut down. If you missed that, cap friendly today was the last day. Got shut down. So I guess Puckpedia is where you got to go now for contract stuff. Krebs is the RFA. They tendered him, so we'll see what that contract looks like this offseason, but a restricted free agent for Peyton Krebs. And if you look at the Sabres lineup right now, I don't think I'd have him in it either, but if he was in the lineup, he's your fourth line center. I don't know where else you would plan to put him, unless, and I'm going real extreme here, the only way I'm carving out a spot in the top 9 for Peyton Krebs, and I don't need to do that. It's why I wanted to see them trade for a third line center. I don't need to see them do it for Peyton Krebs. But the only way he has a top 9 spot is if Dylan Cousins moves the wing. And I don't think anybody wants to see that right now. Maybe that's if one more bad year at center happens, then maybe you hit that button then. But you're not doing that right now. Krebs, I mean, he's a good defensive player. I was diving in on some of his evolving hockey stats in the last couple of days. Offensively, it's just not there, man. It's just not. And I've made the excuses for him for years, really, now. Up until the Casey Middlestat trade. That was my line of demarcation. Prior to March 7th of 2024, that was the day the Sabres traded Casey Middlestat to Colorado for Bo Byram. And on that day, I told you, this is it for Peyton Krebs. This is his shot. my complaint had been Don Granato giving all of these opportunities to young players for years had never given a real opportunity to Peyton Krebs. He played with Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons almost exclusively at 5-on-5 for 2 seasons. And that's a line where you can't expect the guy to develop offensively with those types of players. He didn't develop offensively. And might not be his fault, but now we're here. Now we're here. And the results don't look pretty. In the last 2 seasons, expected goals for percentage for all Sabres forwards that have appeared for them, and actually the last 3 seasons, because that's when, since Krebs has been a regular, 3 seasons worth of sample. Peyton Krebs has a 44.2 expected goals for percentage. Now, that includes everything. That's offense and defense, I guess. That's just possession. That's overall impact. At 5-on-5, 44.2. Here are the list of forwards that have played for the Sabres in the last 3 seasons that have a worse expected goals for percentage than Peyton Krebs. Vinny Hinostroza, Victor Olofsson, John Hayden, Anders Bjork, Cody Eakin, Drake Caggiula, Brandon Byro, and Isak Rosen in the couple of games that he got. 8 forwards. And you might think I just read you off a list of the worst 8 players that have played for the Buffalo Sabres in the last 3 seasons. Some guys that are above Krebs in this department: Lucas Rusek, Brett Murray. How about Tyson Jost is included in this as well? What am I supposed to do with that? I think I'm supposed to look at that and say, yeah, he hasn't been a very good player for them. Not offensively, especially. Defensively, he's really come a long way in the last 2 years. 3 years ago, Evolving Hockey hit him as a very bad defensive player, but in the last 2 years, so the 2022-23 season, defensive percentile league-wide, he was in the 82nd percentile. Last year, he was in the 68th percentile for overall defensive impact, goals above replacement, shorthanded, and even strength. Offensive percentile, though, at Evolving Hockey, 2 years ago, 8%. Last year, 11th percentile. That's bad. That's almost as bad as it gets. He's not making an overall offensive impact. And if you are going to be a regular contributor in any department, defensively even, you got to give a little bit more offensively. He had his shot to do it. Post March 7th, post the Casey Middlestat trade, Peyton Krebs played 18 games for the Buffalo Sabres. That was his chance, and he blew it. He blew it. 1 goal, 4 assists in 18 games. And eventually, after about 10 games, his ice time started to go back down. He saw single-digit ice time twice in the final weeks of the season because it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And he got to play with Jeff Skinner a lot, who was on a 30-goal pace before he got put with Peyton Krebs. He played with Zach Benson a bunch, and it just didn't happen. He's supposed to be, Peyton Krebs, a skilled playmaker. That's what it was built up to be. You kind of see elements of that in his game. He's got quick hands. It looks like he's got good vision, but I don't know what it is. Maybe he got too in his head about working the walls and possession and not giving up, the puck, which is the style that Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons played. Maybe he's afraid to take chances. I don't know what it is, but something has been drilled into him in the last 3 years that has killed his offensive ability as someone that was thought to have a lot of offensive ability when he was drafted and was the number 1 prospect in the Vegas Golden Knights system. It has not come to fruition whatsoever. So if he's here, I think he's an extra. And I think if you have an injury, he goes into your lineup. I think if you want a little bit of extra energy, maybe you throw him in once in a while. And he's a 4th liner. And he's a good defensive player. But he's a 4th line replacement at this point. And that is not at all what you would have hoped for when he was a part of the Jack Eichel trade, and a big part of the Jack Eichel trade. You might have thought when they acquired that package for Eichel, this be right? I think it would be. I think when they made the Eichel trade, Krebs would have been thought of as the most valuable piece. I think that's probably right. Tuch was a very good player, but Krebs, you might have thought the ceiling would have been higher. And first round pick is that way as well. All right, time out here. When we come back, with all that being said, is there any hope for Krebs' trade value? I think I could try to make a sales pitch. If I'm Kevyn Adams, here's what my sales pitch would be to an opposing team. We'll get to that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Listen, just because the Stanley Cup final is over and the NBA final is over as well, that doesn't mean that we're done. There is still a lot going on. You got the Euros going on, Copa America. We got the finals coming up in that as well. Baseball is rocking and rolling in their season. And we've got the Olympics coming up at the end of the month. So there's a lot. And this summer, I didn't mention Open Championship next week at Royal Troon over in the United Kingdom. So we got the another golf major coming up in a week as well. This summer, FanDuel hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. So you want to look for boost or bonus next week. If you want to watch some golf in the morning, by the way, you got to love morning sports, then check out FanDuel Sportsbook. They'll have a bonus or a boost for you. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, we're talking the impact of the Ryan McLeod trade, and I don't believe there is a greater impact on anybody in the organization than Peyton Krebs. For Krebs, he might have thought, this will be my big chance, my last big chance, at least here in Buffalo, is third line center. The decks have cleared, full off season. Let me get in there with a Zach Benson. Let me get in there with a Jason Zucker. Let me get in there with Greenway and watch me put up 40 points and be a good defensive player again. That would have been the dream, right? That would have been the dream. But the Sabres can't play games and hope for that to happen when it hasn't happened yet. They needed to address that need, and they did it. Ryan McLeod, and I got no qualms about them doing that. So now, though, we have to figure out what the impact is and where do you flip. If you want to make a top six trade, and I think a lot of us still do, even if the lineup might be tough to figure out below top six, but you still want them to do a top six trade. And can Peyton Krebs, for instance, be someone that is a main piece or a good contributing piece to a top six package? In most situations, I feel like I want to say no, but let me try to make a sales pitch if I'm Kevyn Adams. If I'm Kevyn Adams, I am using my own success stories, I think, to prop up Krebs as an idea. Krebs is 23 years old. He is still very young. He's very young. And sure, look at the numbers. 3 full seasons, full-ish seasons, 57 games in 21-22. 22 points, 7 goals, 15 assists in 57 games. That was his best season, by the way, was that first year. I mean, that's what? It's like a 35-point pace, 40-point pace, almost 40. The next year, 22-23, while the Buffalo Sabres were the third highest scoring team in the National Hockey League, Peyton Krebs in 74 games had 9 goals and 17 assists, playing 1350 of ice time a night. And then last year, it really came down even more. 80 games played, 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points in 80 games is absolutely unacceptable. But again, 23 years old. If we look back at Sabre success stories, Casey Mittelstadt, what had he done by 23 years old? He had a 40-game season with 19 points, a 41-game season with 22 points, a 31-game season with 9 points, and then a 77-game season with 25 points. Casey Mittelstadt, before his 24th birthday, hadn't achieved 25 points, hadn't exceeded 25 points. And then what happened? 24-year-old season, boom, 59 points, 15 goals, 44 assists. The next year, 47 points in 62 games, and he spun for a top 4 defenseman. And then he balled in Colorado, was really good in Colorado. So Mittelstadt, hey, there's an example of a guy that hadn't really figured it out yet by 23 years old. And Mittelstadt and Krebs are similar enough, aren't they? They were thought of as top prospects that are definite pass first guys, right? Middlestad's big year, 15 goals and 44 assists. Like, that's probably what you would think a Krebs great season would look like, is 15 goals and 44 assists, because he's more of a playmaker. And both guys were pretty high picks. And Middlestad figured it out. And you would be trying to sell to another team that Krebs could be, you're going to buy Krebs low, and then in your system on your team, he's going to take that jump like a Middlestad did. And then the extreme example, of course, of a jump like that is, of course, Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson, coincidentally, was at the same age. 24 was when his big jump happened. That's when Middlestad's happened. That's when Thompson's happened. And you got to cross your fingers. That's when Krebs's will happen if he's here. Thompson's was extreme, right? His age 23 season, 38 games, 8 goals, 6 assists, 14 points. In the 2 years that he played in the league before that, 12 points and 9 points. Thompson hadn't done anything. 14 points was his high, albeit in 38 games. And then, boom, 24 years old, there it is, 38 goals, 30 assists, and then you know the story from there, 47 and 47 after that. And then last year, even injured, still 29 goals, which, 4 years ago would have been a dream for him. So Thompson took a giant step, and he was a top prospect that seemed like he was lost and then figured it out. So Middlestad figured it out at 24, and Thompson figured it out at 24, and that could be a complete coincidence, but can that coincidence continue into a third guy? Can Peyton Krebs do the same thing? There you go. Come on, Philadelphia Flyers. Come buy him now while he's cheap, and then watch him turn into a great player for you. Krebs was once a top prospect. Krebs has speed. Krebs has stick handling ability. Krebs has vision. The hockey IQ, the hockey sense, and the lack of ability to shoot, I think has really hurt him. And I do also think getting in his head that he had to play like a Poso, he had to play like Girgensons, has also impacted him in a big way as well. So maybe there is still a top player to be salvaged in there, because we know the talent level was there from his pre-NHL days, what he did in the minors, what he did in juniors, why he was picked where he was picked. He went 17th in the 2019 draft for Vegas. And the reason he even fell that year, if you remember, was he had torn his Achilles before that. Had he not torn his Achilles in Kootenay, he probably would have been a top 10 pick. And in fact, I don't think probably. He definitely would have been a top 10 pick. So that's where we're at with Peyton Krebs and his value. I think he probably can be someone that still interests teams, but he's not in any way getting you a top 6 forward on his own. That's definitely true. He's not Matt Savoy. Matt Savoy, by the way, is only getting you a third line center, and Krebs is less valuable than Matt Savoy is. There is one trade idea, though, that involves Peyton Krebs that gets the Sabres a top 6 forward that I cannot get out of my head. And it's actually involving a team that I just mentioned. I want to get to that specific idea with Philadelphia when we come back. And there's a reason that I bring up Philadelphia with Krebs. There's reports on that over the past couple of months. We'll get to that when we come back. I've got a specific trade idea that I think works for all parties when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, wrapping things up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Are you sick of all that screaming and shouting as we head to the NFL season, get closer and closer? Well, turn off Fox, turn off ESPN, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's available. It's a free 24/7 streaming channel. YouTube is the one place you could get it. You can get it Amazon Fire TV as well in the channels app there. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, Ryan McLeod's impact on the Sabres lineup impacts no one more than Peyton Krebs. I think the Sabres centermen 1 through 4 to start the season are going to be, if you had me guess right now, it's going to be Thompson, Cousins, McLeod, Lafferty. That would be my guess. Lafferty does have versatility to kick to either wing position. So if someone gets injured, then maybe you move Lafferty to the wing and Krebs gets in as your fourth line center. Or maybe Krebs just has a good enough training camp where he wins that spot outright. By the way, it's also worth pointing out, I meant to get to this as well. Who else does this impact? I think this impacts Yuri Kulik. I had Matt Beauvais on WGR, Matt Beauvais of Channel 7 WKBW. I had him on WGR this morning. And Beauvais said that he thinks the Sabres really like Kulik. They'd love for him to come into camp and win a spot. And they see him still as a centerman. They see Kulik as a centerman. So, I don't know how that happens. If he's dynamite in training camp and they want it at center, I think that's when you're moving Dylan Cousins to the wing, because you're not moving Ryan McLeod from third line center. I guess you could move McLeod to fourth line center and then just say, well, we're stacked down the middle. If Kulik can give us anything, you go Thompson, Cousins, Kulik, and McLeod. You move Lafferty to the wing, and then you really got to do something with Peyton Krebs at that point, because now he's like two guys out of the lineup. But anyways, McLeod in makes the path harder for Kulik at center. It might make it so that Kulik, to make the team, would have to do it at wing. Or maybe that's a path too. They could, if he's so good in camp and they really are intent on McLeod being the third line center and Lafferty playing center too, then maybe you go Kulik on the wing on the third line in his first NHL season, with the idea that in the future he's going to move to center, and maybe that's when you get to Cousins moving to the wing, if he still hasn't taken a big step back forward this year. Which, by the way, I still don't know whether or not I want to bet on that, but we'll talk about Cousins. We don't have enough time right now to get into it on Cousins, because I'm gonna need 10 shows to figure out my feelings on Dylan Cousins for this season. I've got a specific trade idea that involves Peyton Krebs. This is a flip-flop, right? Like, you keep pivoting. You move Middlestat for Byram. It's okay, I improved my top four, but now I want to go back. I want to flip a lower-level defenseman and improve my my third-line center spot. They did that with a prospect. Okay, well, now I got my third-line center. So now I suddenly have this surplus of centermen. So now I can take that. I can spin it into something else. Peyton Krebs. All right, what do we need? We need a top six forward still, right? Need a top six forward. So I'm looking at all these trade bait lists, and one guy that, interestingly, I can't even tell you why he would be available. And maybe that would go to mean that he's actually not available. But he finds his way into rumors quite often. And he's on all these trade bait lists. He's on Daily Faceoffs. He was on TSNs. I was reading just like a Flyers blog the other day, and it was rumors about Joel Farabee in Philadelphia and whether or not he could be traded. And I guess this all originated from Elliot Friedman briefly mentioning in April. This is where all this is stemming from. Elliot Friedman briefly mentioning in April that Danny Briere, GM of the Flyers, was open for business if the right deal arises for Joel Farabee. Farabee was mentioned there. Here's the exact quote from also Dave Pagnotta. So I had that Friedman quote of they'd be open for business on Farabee for the right deal. One sentence in April is all we had. Then Dave Pagnotta added kind of same thing, like one sentence. He wrote a couple months ago, also on the Flyers, they're open to trading winger Joel Farabee and have been shopping him. Okay, there you go. I don't know why they're doing that. Joel Farabee, here again, I got to go to Puckpedia instead of Cap Friendly. We'll see. Puckpedia, we'll get used to it, right? Joel Farabee, top six winger, 20-plus goals last year, 24 years old, left winger of the Philadelphia Flyers. He has 4 more years on his contract. Actually, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I counted wrong. 5 more years at $5 million per year. Kind of reminiscent of the Alex Tuch contract, right? Top 6 player, pretty good guy. You maybe would be hoping for more in an elevated role, and he's under contract. It's not a terrible deal. It's not the Skinner deal. It's not $9 million, and it's term for a long time at a good age, 24 years old. Like, why would Philadelphia be looking to trade a good player on a fine contract at a good age? I have no idea. I couldn't tell you why they'd be looking to do that. But I got two insiders that claim they know that they are looking to do that, or they would be open to doing it at the very least. Okay, so there you go. Joel Farabee. This is my idea. It's this guy. Farabee had 22 goals and 28 assists last year, 50 points. Year before that, 15 goals, 39 points, 17 goals, 34 points, 20 goals, 38 points, 8 goals, 21 points. That's his career. 21 points, 38 points, 34 points, 39 points, 50 points. That in a rundown with 2 20-goal seasons coming off his best year. I'm not going to lie, it kind of reminds me of Alex Tuch's career. Tuch's contract is not that different, and the career is not that different. Before Tuch got to Buffalo, he had one 50-point season and a couple of 30 to 40-point seasons. Kind of reminiscent, right, of Joel Farabee. The other similarity between the two, of course, is they're both from Syracuse. They know each other. I believe they played together in the past. I don't know if they're like best friends, but I know they know each other. I know they've played together at some level before. They're both from Syracuse. And I don't know that Joel Farabee is a huge Sabre fan like Tuch was, and it'd be his dream to play for the Buffalo Sabres, but I might want to infer that he'd be more open to it than a lot of other players in the league because he's from Syracuse, and Syracuse is not that far away. It's not next door, but it's a couple-hour drive down the 90. So I feel like I got a player that I think would be open to coming here. By the way, this needs to be pointed out, as it does with everything. Joel Farabee does not have, again, I'm getting used to reading Puckpedia, but I believe I have this right. Yeah, I have it right. No trade clause. There's no trade clauses. No trade protection. The Flyers can trade him anywhere, and they don't have to ask him, technically speaking. So I got a guy that probably would be open to coming here. I'm going to guess he is. I've got a guy that's under contract, that's at a good age, 24 years old. That's a good player. He's not the best player, but he's a good player. And I think I could get him for a price that's not obscene because, again, he's a guy that scored 50 points one time in 5 years. I don't have to go nuts, I don't think. You want his evolving hockey stats? Last year, 65th percentile offensively, a 33rd percentile defensive player. So below average defensively, but not like the worst. He's definitely better than Jeff Skinner on that front, I can tell you that. And then offensively, like a pretty solid player. Looking through evolving hockey even more, you look at expected goals, fine. Scoring chances, fine. Like, just a fine player. Just a fine player in Joel Farabee that would be an upgrade in the Sabres top 6 today. And as I'm kind of the long build-up here, Peyton Krebs has been mentioned with the Philadelphia Flyers multiple times. This idea is going to come down to whether or not you trust the Friedmans of the world, because I've got multiple reports, and Dave Pagnotta has been the one that's had this the most. The first time Dave Pagnotta reported about this was February 14th, when he said that Peyton Krebs is a player the Philadelphia Flyers like and have scouted, but there haven't been any trade talks yet between Buffalo and Philadelphia. That was Dave Pagnotta 5 months ago, saying the Flyers like Krebs. They've scouted him. Any chance the two sides have talked in the last 5 months? Because, okay, by February they hadn't talked, but what about by now? By July? Have they talked? Because to me, if I'm Kevyn Adams or I'm anyone that works for the Sabres, and I even saw that report, I'm going to go, hey, you want to call Philly? Because we don't have a spot for this guy in the lineup, and they might like him. So here's my idea. Philly needs a right shot defenseman, too. Look at their lineup. They need a right shot defenseman. They're tough to get. All right, Philly, you want to do business? You are open to trading Joel Farabee? I don't really know why, but you're open to it? Okay. You like Peyton Krebs? Okay. Same even there. I don't really even know why a lot there, but you like him? Maybe he's a John Tortorella type of guy. You know, tough, energy guy that will fight, defensively sound. All right, you're interested in Peyton Krebs? You need a right shot defenseman? Here's Henry Jokiharju. Let's do Peyton Krebs, Henry Jokiharju, and we'll give you a second-round pick or one of our B-level prospects, like a Victor Nuchev, someone that's not one of the first-round guys. We'll give you those 3 pieces for Joel Farabee. What say you, Danny Briere? Or if you really want to do it, okay, here's Isak Rozan. You get a first-round prospect. I'm open to dealing him because I don't really have a spot for him, and he it's time for the NHL, right? For Rozan, he has been developing now for 3 full seasons. 4 full seasons of development, that's generally, you reach a 4th season not making it to the NHL, you're probably not going to be a very good player. Time to go. Time to be in the NHL. So maybe you have a spot for him, Philly, maybe you don't, but here you go. This pick, who, by the way, originally belonged to you. This is the player that the Sabres drafted with the Rasmus Ristolainen trade. So here you go, Philly. Here's that prospect back. You could take, he's a flyer maybe at this point, but no pun intended. Wow, that definitely worked though. So Krebs, Jokiharju, and Rozan, or like a 2nd-round pick for Joel Farabee. I get my top 6 player. He's going to play on my 2nd line. You get a player you like apparently in Krebs. You get a right shot defenseman that's tough to find and you need, and we'll do business. That's my best trade idea involving Peyton Krebs that gets you the thing you need, a top 6 winger. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe Matt Savoy costing you a 3rd-line center, or excuse me, a 3rd-line center costing Matt Savoy should maybe tell me that a top 6 player, even like Joel Farabee, is going to cost a lot more than that. Maybe I'm naive on that front, but I've just connected dots here. I got reports about the Flyers and Krebs. I got reports about the Flyers and Farabee. I got a right shot defenseman need. I've got a litter of prospects still, even with Savoy out. I feel like there could be a deal to be done there involving these pieces, getting Farabee back to Buffalo, who's a player we've talked about before. Nothing too brand new here, but player that could still get dealt. All right, that's my idea. Timeout here for today. Timeout for today. We'll talk defenseman. I keep pushing back that Hadi Kalakash interview. He's got COVID now. He's real, we're having a tough time getting there, but we will. Promise we'll get that big prospects breakdown bonanza for you in as soon as we can get it in for you. In the meantime, though, we'll talk blue line, we'll talk defenseman, and we'll start going through different line combination ideas because I've got a bunch of thoughts on that I want to get to at some point coming up. We'll keep rocking and rolling through the off season. You want to text us, do it at our text line, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up if you're not already a subscriber. Thanks for listening today to the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.